My name is Kyle Gerner. I am a board member of Venetia Literary Arts. Just wanted to say thank you all for coming, and thank you to our lovely guests who are here, and Audrey for coordinating so much tonight, for the events committee who did a lot of work to put this on, and to the bookshop for hosting. This is a lovely space. We do have books for sale in the back we can do afterwards. We also have, some of the books didn't quite arrive in time, so they'll be coming in later in the coming days and weeks, so you're welcome.
We have book plates that if you want to buy in advance, we'll get the authors to send book plates, and we can even ship them to you. So.
Okay. Sounds good, thanks. So I'll just say a quick word about Venetia Literary Arts. We are a 501c nonprofit organization. We're based in Venetia. And we primarily do two things. We publish books, and we put on events to help foster our community of readers and writers here. Our funding sources come from donations, which you can of course do online at our website, but we also rely on grants. And so it is very helpful for grant funding if we track our attendance. So we do have a clipboard coming around. I think it's in the back somewhere. It's made its way there. Okay, great. So if everyone can just put your name if you'd like to be on our mailing list. You can put your email address on there too. If you can say if you live in Venetia or not, that's also helpful. So anyway, if you can sign that, that's very helpful. And I think if you'd like to become a member as well, come talk to us afterwards, and you can learn more about that on our website. And I think that is it. So I'll go ahead and introduce Audrey. So. Audrey has been published in the genres of speculative fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry, and is a champion for the literary arts as a tool for wellness and preserving cultural narratives. Audrey is co-chair for next year's World Fantasy Convention, to be held in Oakland on October of 2026. You can learn more at her website, ancestralfutures.org, and we'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Kyle. Tonight, I'm super excited to be here. We're celebrating Black History Month and subsequently Black Futures. And we have 8 amazing readers who are here. Everyone that's here is someone that I've read with in the past, someone whose work I admire and appreciate. So I've carefully hand-curated the reading that you're about to experience tonight. And let's see, what else did I want to say? Each reader is going to read for approximately 8 minutes. Readers, I'll be sitting right here at the 7-minute mark. I'll put up a finger. That means please wrap it up, because we have to keep on time. After the last reader, we will do a Q&A. So we'll take questions from the audience, and we'll also take any questions. I think the bookstore had some ideas for some questions for their social media as well. So with that, it is my pleasure to bring up our first reader. And because we have so many readers, we're going to just go in alphabetical order tonight by last name. So first up, we have the amazing M.K. Chavez. M.K. Chavez is the founder of Ouroboros Writing Lab, where she leads workshops and coaching sessions that support writers in developing their craft. A mixed-race writer, educator, and editor based in Oakland, she is also the author of Mothermorphosis and Dear Animal. Dear Animal is for sale up front. We have physical hard copies there. Beyond the lab, she co-directs the Berkeley Poetry Festival every year, curates literary events, and offers leadership and system change consulting to arts organizations. Please welcome M.K. Chavez.
So I'm going to count on Shawn to tell me if I'm not projecting enough. It's good? Okay. Sometimes I'll start unprojecting as I go more into the story.
Golden pipes.
All right. During the pandemic, I did what any normal person would do, and I watched over 400 horror films and decided that it was an excellent way for me to explore identity. I was a mixed race zombie. I wasn't born a relentless creature of resurrection. If I could, I would eat from the top of my head. I would feed the 7th chakra, that mysterious lotus, 1,000 petals and 20 layers of 50 more petals. Once I was so invisible that I ate my way into existence. I consumed the bigot cashier from Joanne Fabrics, the man at Whole Foods who wanted to cut me in line. I ate the wolf whistler and his wife. Then I said, I am pure consciousness because my lotus ate your lotus. My lotus eats fear. My lotus lingers at the gateway of history, loving versus Virginia, liminal skin, one drop or more. My brother named me dark magic. My uncle sang brown sugar at me. Children of the emerging paradigm, who will pick you for their team? My lotus has eaten every inquiry into mixed race. My lotus mestiza, my lotus in Spanglish, my lotus in Salvi Noir, my lotus in Afro-hyphenate, my lotus eating the binary and then belching. Lotus of mystery ethnic and not enough boxes. Lotus of the multiracial multiverse. The most terrifying part of the movie is never what you think. What if zombies are just misunderstood? Hypodiegetic. My black grandfather and me devoured, caught in my father's maw. How my father never spoke of his side of the family. And there is a footnote to this piece. In 1933, General Hernandez Martinez responded enthusiastically to the rise of fascism in Europe and wrote immigration limitation into law that prohibited the entrance of Africans, Asians, Arabs, and Gypsies into El Salvador. And also cleared any identity off of birth certificates and everybody was erased. No one was anything other than white. And I'll leave you with something cheerful. The devourer. The grandmother pretends to have heart attacks. It begins with small things. If the girl doesn't eat what the grandmother has cooked, if the girl brings nature in from the overgrown garden, snails crawling up her small arms, if the girl holds any questions in her mouth. La caperucita roja wears sanguine, the color of blood and life. The grandmother predicts the girl is destined to fail, to be lured, to be torn apart, consumed. Grandmother's false heart attacks become more frequent as the girl gets older. Heart attack when the girl is late coming home. Heart attack when she catches the girl kissing a boy. Heart attack when she catches the girl kissing a girl. Heart attack for days when the girl is kicked out of catechism for wanting to discuss abortion. The grandmother likes to tell the girl the story of La Ciguanaba. It's been the girl's bedtime story for as long as she can remember. La Cigui, as the girl calls her, is misunderstood, the girl believes. Cigui only means to protect. As grandmother tells the story, men are drawn to her beauty and led astray because of her evil nature. The men, having given in to temptation, are lost forever in the forest. The girl knows there is another story behind this story. One where La Ciguanaba, a young woman who could not be contained in a domestic cage created for her, and for that she was called monster and witch and dispatched to live in the wild. The rest of the story remains the same. La Ciguanaba wanders, and sometimes men with bad intentions or a cage, will follow her as she pushes her creaky cart next to the river. And she will respond the only way that she can when they come to her. She will open her face and show them a mirror, and there's so much truth light that the men, having confronted their own true nature, are lost forever. Grandmother calls Lazigi a monster, not a redeemer. She who brings balance when a wrong has been committed. The girl loves wolves and monsters, wants to grow up to be a redeemer. She dreams she is running through the forest, free and able to be who she is meant to be. The grandmother fakes heart attacks for 13 years before she's caught in a trap of her own making. The girl's wolf wakes. The girl climbs out of her wolf. The wolf climbs out of her girl. In this way, they are in a perpetual state of evolution. The grandmother has suspicions. The girls smile, sharp and tiny teeth, a toothy grin, furry on the inside. The lip of her lip. When the girl enters the room, everything becomes metallic and electric. She has a wolf's gait, the grandmother thinks. She oversteps. She does not ask permission. Sometimes she lopes and bursts into a gallop. Sometimes the girl sits quietly and observes. The girl's wanderings grow more and more regular, and the grandmother's false heart attacks increase. The grandmother twists and writhes on the floor. Sometimes the girl growls and bares her teeth, or she laughs, her fangs glinting in the moon. The grandmother grows desperate, each heart attack more flamboyant than the last. The grandmother calls to her God and asks, "What have I done to deserve this?" Wolf Girl encircles the grandmother and takes bites, here and there. Open wounds bring light into the dark spaces. The grandmother moves on, from heart attacks to threats of suicide. A wolf came upon a fairy tale and a girl in need. The wolf swallowed them both, carried them in her warm belly, where they were covered in languor and vernix, and they grew apex and lovely. The day came when it was time, and the story emerged. The wolf and the girl, one inside the other. Together, they took the first step and spilled open with the new story of them. Thank you.
So Jenee and Kevin are going to switch places. Jenee works in radio, so she needs to preserve her radio voice. So she's going to wait for the microphone. That's more than fair. Yes, her instrument. Yes, her vocal instrument. All right, so we are going to move on to Mr. Kevin Dublin. Kevin Dublin is a writer of poetry, prose, scripts, and code. He's the author of Eulogy and How to Fall in Love in San Diego. And you can find his recent work in the Brooklyn Rail, Plowshares, and Apocrypha magazine. Kevin is proudly from Smithfield, North Carolina. What? And believes in you and the power of collective transformation. So we don't have physical copies of Kevin's book, but there is a QR code that you could scan if you're interested in purchasing Kevin's books back there. Please welcome Kevin Dublin.
In advance, this is probably way too much information, but have you ever got caught in your sinuses? What you can definitely tell and feel is a hair. And it's just like not coming. I'm like trying to make myself cough, and it's just been irritating. But I am going to still attempt to project. All right, excellent. Another Genesis. We begin as a story and end as another story sowed. Like officer's hand over holster as a murder of crows scatter from lampposts like a dark dandelion blown. I'm just an animal with a long shadow searching for my origin like any mate. It takes silence to recognize a poem. Notice the magpie bobbing at the fruit on twigs in a live oak tree is only her hunger. Then notice all things were once someone's wish. A park's wave-like geometric play structure is sometimes triumph, sometimes gentrification, and sometimes both, all depending on who you are. Like everything is the arc of one thing transforming into another. Winter horizon. Raindrops become the ocean again and again. My black rootedness is in the universe. It is the universe. It is universal. As an origin story, as an exit wound. I tell this story now because when the time comes, I must be ready to kill or die. Because you must be ready to die or kill. How much of life, how much is a life? How much is a life worth in units of murder? I remember humidity's rub against the porch screen, how armpits at 13 sweat on a summer midnight. Across the street, a cousin's shadow staggers like a samba, arm around his belly as if he was his own dance partner. Hum of street lamplight innocent until it falls across blood. I heard he knew not to test a straight shooter aiming a pistol. I remember driving a white Honda Civic with student driver written on the back, waiting to turn at a red stoplight onto 301 from Bookadary Road. I'm 15. Coach Spraggins beside me, reminding me to keep your hands on the wheel now, keep your eyes on the road, as clouds skate away from the sun. Shimmers worn across wing veins of a honeybee crawling my left hand as the stoplight flashes to green. My time has come. She stings me before I shake my elbow to shoo her away. I pain. I almost cuss. Forget how soft survival is, how warm. I watch the descent of her sad and aware corpse. This moment, a reminder. All bees share an ancestor who was a carnivorous wasp. The way most origin stories share a common source. Once, everything was one, and we were darkness. We were as deep as a rumor the universe knows is true. The first images of black holes are all-encompassing darkness pulling in a base ring of light. Nothing escapes the drag of event horizon. Not small stars nor moons, even planets absorbed and reduced to heavy black singularity. Like a blade tip, no better a bullet. Wait long enough and scientific theory catches up to other origin stories. How the universe began from a single point, and they call it the Big Bang. You, me, all of our stories, exit wounds spilling the desire to be one again. My black rootedness is in love. It's in joy. It's in choosing love and with it respect for all in service of equilibrium, in service of lasting abundance and peace. And my black rootedness recognizes that there are enemies of peace. There are those who seek extraction and accumulation above all else, guided by whatever false god or economy or political affiliation they claim. My black rootedness turns the other cheek, but it also closes one eye to aim down the sights. But tonight, instead of reading about politics, I get in a hot tub to settle into the newlywed phase. Whole lunar cycle at once. Our kisses, birch branches in the wind, celestial upon earth. Leaves leaving to become heaps of shadow at night. Mosquito tangles between my beard and drinks itself to death. Splash of Cabernet from chin, stains blanket under snow moon. Highway whoosh and crickets make mellow between promises, glistening as a stone in the distance. I could die tonight, and it wouldn't matter whether I'd been murdered by some function of the American system. A different kind of ecstasy, a wasp landing on the neck but showing mercy. Love like a Zen Buddhist student running to his master to tell him about a crow's caw heard from a boat. Your lips, my lips, your thighs, my hand, the simple agony of being unable to reach your soul. My black rootedness is Pan-African, shared history and traditions. It's diaspora. It's being asked where you're from and having half of your story being rooted in truth and the other half invention. There is power. Power, wonder-working power in the blood. Where am I from? Another origin. Because I come from a place where memory slips as easily as fingers across a silk dreadlock head wrap. I come from loblolly pines lining the highway, from the taste of smoke from backyard barbecue, even when you don't eat meat. I come from train whistles and routine rumble shaking human bedroom between evening Junebug songs and a radio tuned to Foxy 107, 104. Gray fox, fox squirrel, flying squirrel, white-tailed deer that called this land home. Land green with grasses, with cotton and tobacco fields that ancestors would work as much as would work, and gold and mud they would walk across as much as they would swim in. The Noose. A river the Nusiak people once tended, the Noose. A river my father learned to swim in his youth as much as what he barely escaped. The Noose, now polluted with decades of hog waste, thousands of nitrogen-sick fish sunbathe along shores. I come from the earth, like seedlings radical work to claim March sun and say, this is my light. Have you ever seen a yellow daffodil open up? I come from exodus and bloom, from searching for the difference between to heal and to cure. I come from so many things. It's Pisces season, pages turning over whatever we may weave. From a 40-year-old pregnant after another miscarriage, from neurodivergence of beginnings anew, from the cocoon of skateboard wheels over sidewalk cracks on Wilmington nights and afternoons, head bobbing between headlights behind shrubs. I come from the Mars dust-tone gleam of a street drummer's skin in the sun, from the pattern in a mother's skirt as she leads her toddler to dance to the beat on Market Street. I come from a nod to every black man I pass, from Van Ness Avenue in San Francisco to Telegraph Ave and 18th Street at Cafe Van Cleef in Oakland. From a year of pandemic growth untwisted to locked fit together. 10 years, which began with Miss Angie, Oakland's finest loctician, and ends and hands that first braided in Senegal. I come from laughter and long embraces from aunties, from the rustle of a few dollars from a soup pocket into a collection plate as you brought me from a mighty long way, tenderly escapes the alto section of choir. From look to your neighbor and say, neighbor. I said, look to your neighbor and say, neighbor. Neighbor. He brought me from a mighty long way. My black rootedness is migration, is searching and research, and asking for understanding. My black rootedness is knowing this is not all. It is knowing that some seek to discover what has already been revealed and uncovered for ego, for money, for endless hunger, for something which has already been offered for free. My black rootedness and my black futures is in the DNA. It's thousands of years of movement. It is everlasting. What is yours?
I think our microphone has arrived. While we're finalizing that, I just need to say one thing. Smithfield, North Carolina is about 45 minutes from where I grew up, Jacksonville, North Carolina. So Kevin spoke about things like the Neuse River. I thought I was the only one writing about the Neuse River because that is the river every Saturday morning. I was my daddy's little fishing buddy, and we would go, he taught me how to catfish on the Neuse River outside of Kinston. Yeah, so we got to talk about...
I know exactly what you're
Yes, called the Neuse. We got to talk about the Neuse River. So I think we're ready to set up the mic. Give us one moment.
So next up, Jenee Darden is an award-winning Oakland journalist, author, and mental health advocate who hosts KALW's Sights and Sounds segment and has reported for major outlets including NPR, Time Magazine, and the Los Angeles Times. A USC journalism graduate and author of When a Purple Rose Blooms, available for purchase in the back shelf there. She explores Black womanhood through her writing and curates Let Her Tell It, readings focused on Black women's mental health. Please welcome Jenee Darden.
So much better. Thank you so much. I'm just so honored to be with all of you. Thank you everybody who came. Thank you Audrey for curating this and inviting me. So real quick, this reading is inspired by my shero, Captain Michael Burnham. Yes! And I'm a new Star Trek fan, but yes, and I did meet her. So there's an annual Star Trek convention in San Francisco that I went to, Audrey went to, and so we were able to meet some of the actors there. So Sumiko Martin Green, who played Captain Michael Burnham, was there. And so I was able to tell her that she was the shero I was waiting for. Because that character is strong and vulnerable and complex and has a big heart. It's just so many just issues and just so many just things I loved about her as a black woman. Seeing her in her natural hair, seeing her going across the universe and exploring and being adventurous. And yeah, people criticize her for crying, but she whoop your ass too if you came for her. And I loved her for all of that. Like, to embody that vulnerability and that strength. And so, and to see a black couple saving the universe or saving universes was so powerful. Queer families, I mean, that show was revolutionary to me. So this reading is in honor of that character. And I got into like sci-fi, fantasy, comic books and stuff, watching Adam's West Batman reruns. And so when my mother told me that there was a black Catwoman, I was like, what? So, so when I watched Eartha Kitt, I was like, man, if they could have like a really cool black Catwoman, a cool black villain, when am I going to see a cool black shero? And so for me, that's when Michael Burnham came. But this is called Eartha Kitt, Selena Kyle. I admire the courage of Josephine and Nina, and love the grace that was Lena. I honor the words of Maya and Zora and respect the strength of Tina. But I will admit, in my head, shit, I'm like Eartha Kitt, a wildcat you can't contain, a curvy feline you can't confine, a sexy kitten, a rebel vixen. I got the guys and the girls smitten. Fellas, I'll purr if you love me right, treat it right. I'm a Black Panther in the justice fight, but I stay keeping my hair and my style tight. My claws are polished and ready to dig in his back when I please, tear the flesh from misogyny, or just feel pretty. Darling, I've never been a good girl, but I'm damn good at being a woman. I'm a lady in the streets, a vigilante all the time. I'm going for mine. I'm going to take what's mine. I'm going to take back what's mine. I speak my mind. Even made a first lady cry when I said young men dying in war just ain't right. I've been blacklisted in the most wanted. Danger, a smart, confident black woman, not afraid to call out your stuff. First ladies, that poor, handsome billionaire, and everyone in between, they can't handle me. They not ready for me. A dress and pearls kind of girl, a leather and whips chick. Don't make me mad. A designer bag and diamonds woman. I'm the arch nemesis to your foolishness and will tell it like it is. I call the shots. Call me the boss. The streets try to take me down, but darling, I have 9 lives. I always land on my feet, so don't even try me. I'll never be Superwoman, no S on my chest. To hell with that. You're a fool to think this black woman would carry the world on her back. Some call me villain, anti-hero, a shero, the best who ever played the role, but I'm not acting. This is me, authentically, all day, every day, slaying the world, darling, my way. And so I started watching Discovery after I had surgery in 2023. And so I don't know if you all know, black women have higher rates of fibroids than any group of women in the country. This is called Black Widows. I'm like Bonnie Swanson, the woman on Family Guy pregnant for 6 years and 122 episodes. Me, I'm in my 9th year and 2nd trimester, shopping for maternity clothes at Ross, hiding my stomach under baggy clothes, wearing a lot of black. In a few months, I'll be in a hospital, delivering at least 8 tumors, trying to bleed me to death so they can leave. As I prepare for the operating room, I imagine my body is an arcade game. The surgeon is using a robotic claw to carefully pick each fibroid, drop them in a chute, then claim her prize. After the anesthesia puts me to sleep, I'll dream I'm Ripley at the end of Terminator 3, falling in slow motion into a fiery vat. Midway, an alien fetus's head tears through my stomach, screeching. I caress this thing that my body has housed and fed, but want to choke me at the same time. When I awaken from surgery, I'll be in a new club, a widow, like Natasha, a black widow, young women sterilized, trafficked, and brainwashed to be global assassins. That's on Earth 616. In my universe, the widows are a legion of black women who suffer from fibroids more than any other group of women. Women in agonizing pain, weakened by anemia. The medical industry doesn't see us enough. We are warriors fighting for ourselves, our sisters, our families, and communities. We're on the front lines every day, and too many of us are on the operating tables, having our uteruses removed. Some of us had no choice. Some of us were given no other choice. After the anesthesia wears off, we change out of our gowns and are discharged back out to the world that refuses to see our pain, but we keep fighting the Black widows.
You have 4 minutes.
Okay, cool. So, Black Afrofuturism, discovery, what I love is about, you know, us imagine, it's just imagination, right? Giving us the space to imagine. And our ancestors imagined, and that's why we had the freedoms that we have. So this piece is called Moo Moo. One, I'm lighting it up a bit. One, for Christmas, my grandma gave me 2 moo-moos, one the color of a tangerine sunset, the other designed with swirls of black and white. She ordered them from those catalogs where older Black women buy extravagant church suits. I was like, I'm old enough for Black church suit catalog fashion? Grandma's gift was a rite of passage into middle-aged Black womanhood, an honor bestowed from our hard work, a reminder to rest. And that rest is a privilege I earned from the beginning of my existence. At home, I slip off my bra, freeing my chest from underwires and straps. I untie the head wrap around my afro puff and let my hair extend into a crown. Then I slip into my moo-moo, the tangerine sunset one, lay on my couch, drape a plum throw over my body, and drift into dreamscape. Lullaby by Beethoven blues, I am curled up on a cloud, floating in a warm midnight sky sprinkled with stars. The cloud descends so slowly over time that I don't feel its movement. I find myself on top of ocean waves. The water invites me in. I slide in. Mermaids and ancient creatures greet me. We swim. They lead me deep into an ocean world within an ocean, within a world, inhabited by people that folks tried to bury, but had no clue their roots ran past beyond the bottom of the earth, across dimensions and through time. These people are the ancestors of towns flushed underwater. These are the ancestors who made homes out of materials from sunken slave ships. Everybody here is free. They welcome me into their realm of love, where Destiny's harp and Alice Coltrane's chants reach. Their songs wash us in peace. I close my eyes. My moo-moo flows to the melodies. The ancestors hold my hands and whisper, float, child, just float. And I'll read one last one. Let's see. Where was it? I ran out of time. I had it my little bookmark, but it dropped out. I love that when I found it, that little bell went off. Okay. Last one. You can't stop me from soaring. And this speaks to the strength and just the inspiration of Captain Michael Burnham, who persevered despite, you know, all of her challenges, inner and outer. You can't stop me from soaring. In the beginning, I was a small flower pot, filled with rich soil, fertile with possibility. You nurtured me, you, my gardeners of life, dropped seeds of knowledge and women's empowerment, seeds of courage and self-love, seeds of spirit, strong seeds in a sexist, racist world that couldn't stop this Black girl. Over time, my petals bloomed larger than palm leaves, then into wings. Can you believe it? Wings. My flower pot couldn't hold me, and I was ready to fly and shine. And just as I was about to take flight, life slammed me down. I reached out my hand, praying you were around. Instead, you were behind me, turning the blades in my back. My soul bled every second, but I can't go back in time to what I thought you were, we were, all lies. I mourned my past life as you kept turning the knife. You rained down on me your fears and envy. You called my wisdom foolish, my confidence weak, my Blackness oversensitive. You called my womanhood whorish. How dare I try for the sky when you really wanted me down, deep in your barrel of regret for bad choices made and unfulfilled dreams. But as Maya Angelou said, my description cannot fit your tongue, for I have a certain way of being in this world. See, you forgot. you're dealing with an unstoppable girl, a woman on fire, a phoenix. No, my name ain't Jean Grey, but me, Jenee. I'm just as powerful. I can't be contained. Your life soars won't stop me from soaring, from praying, from healing. Your life soars won't stop me from soaring, ever. Move out of the way. There's my sky. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenee. Next up we have Jacalyn Eyvonne. Jacalyn Eyvonne is a current Vallejo Poet Laureate. Her books include I Am Not an Inconsequential Word, The Unyielding Weight of Words, and Venting to Verse, How to Turn Anger into Poetry. And we do have hard copies of Yvonne's books, of Jacalyn Eyvonne's books on the back there for sale. So let's see, in addition to being published in numerous anthologies across the globe, she is the founder of Monologues and Poetry International Film Fest and author of Strange Things Happen at Midnight, a collection of short, weird tales. Please welcome Miss Jacalyn.
My mother's hands weave stories in the language of DNA, passed down through generations. Each movement of her fingers mapped constellations inside the beads that weaved through my hair, creating sparkles inside my mother's eyes as quantum energy traveled over my scalp, moving inside the twists and plaits of Bantu knots and cornrows, spirals of ancient algorithms, forming patterns passed down over generations. Mama's floor was a salon chair. My head rested against the couch between her legs. Magic flowed from her hands as I slipped between worlds, each coil becoming a portal that I saw my ancestors walk through. I felt the ancient pull of time behind closed eyes, activating the fibers inside my braids as my head weaved gently beneath her fingers, connecting my genes with the patterns of star maps. My soul dancing inside the designs born from the black holes across my crown. When I close my eyes, I walk between worlds, stepping through time across dimensions, passing through braided doorways of algorithmic truth. My scalp sizzles in the warmth of spirits, shimmering inside sacred bloodlines that whisper across the nebulae. Stardust gathered across my mother's fingertips, extracting mathematical exactness. Every line calculated to form the constellations, mapped and intertwined between cowrie shells of sun rays. My Nigerian forebears navigate their vessels through pathways within the solar system. Beads contain the storytelling of the griots, dancing between the past and future, carrying the remnants of history, both pain. My mother's hands weave stories in the language of DNA, passed down through generations. Each movement of her fingers mapped constellations inside the beads that weaved through my hair, creating sparkles inside my mother's eyes as quantum energy traveled over my scalp, moving inside the twists and plaits of Bantu knots and cornrows, spirals of ancient algorithms, forming patterns passed down over generations. And glory, bending across time and space like the sweet rhythm of the absence of gravity, where kindred spirits float over the spatial planes of my mind. A bead slipped from my mother's hand, falling slowly past my ear. And I hear the ancestors echoing between dimensions, stepping forward, breaking through the bounds of all things earthly. I understand now why my mother's hands trembled when she threaded beads, why her eyes reflected dense halos that spiraled like the Milky Way. There is freedom in the follicles of physics written in our hair, written in the curves of our cornrows. When I sat on the floor of my mother's cosmic salon chair, the coils and curves of my hair became coded in the language of our fingers. Mother read beads like I read a book. In her hands, the lines in my hair hummed with power. I was both child and cosmos, learning to speak the language of stars, learning to read the beaded code to call upon my stellar kin to walk the astral road. For in my blood runs stardust, and in the beads worn in my hair, infinity. This is how I will move across the portals of the future. Deliberate, mathematical, skipping from Earth to Neptune and beyond with the shake of my head and the tips of my hands, carrying with me the archive of my history, bound inside the texture of my strands.
Y'all give it up one more time for the Vallejo Poet Laureate. Thank you, Ms. Jacalyn. Next up we have Mr. Duane Horton. Duane Horton is a Black queer fantasy writer who resides in the Bay Area. He believes in writing his intersection of identity into his fantasy stories to widen the canon of literature, and so that folks who share his intersection can see themselves on the page. Duane graduated with his MFA, Master's in Fine Arts in Creative Writing, in 2019, and since then has been published with Green Mountains Review, Sea Glass Literary, Sapphire Hughes Press, and more. Duane recently published a book, No Hero Alone, which can be found on Amazon, but we don't like them, so you're gonna buy it from the back shelf back there. Let's give it up for Duane.
Thank you so much. This is a story that I wrote called Sun Warrior. I had another story prepared, but you know, you want to be thoughtful about stories that you feel like aren't quite ready for the whole world. So, this is called Sun Warrior. The moon glowed and gleamed, blinging like a watch catching the light from the sun, blinging like a chain made of diamonds. Jean's eyes, yellow as the sun, but not as bright, laid on to Dre. Dre, who seemed like he carried the sun with him, even at night. "What's with that look in your eye?" Dre said, raising an eyebrow. "If I didn't know any better, it looks like you're hungry." Jean finished his sentence, leaning on to Dre, his body hard as stone, his skin dark as the void. "You would be too if you'd been asleep for as long as I was." "Well, good thing I broke you out of that old-ass coffin then," Dre said, the sun in his smile as he rolled his eyes and playfully pushed Jean away from him. Dre had uncovered Jean from his coffin. It breached from the water like a whale, but still found itself covered by the shallow parts of the sandy shore. The coffin was studded in metals and jewelry, easily detected by his metal detector. But Dre found none of that compared to the treasure that was Jean, who he had found inside once he pried the coffin open. Dre had never considered himself a grave robber before, but he also didn't want to consider himself a starving person either. Jean leaned back onto him, and even at rest, he was a force. He pointed up towards the moon, its glow attempting to rival the sun's. Its beauty put Dre in a trance. "You know," Jean began, baring his fangs as he was wont to do, The moon looks better when you're a vampire. It looks like its true form. You can't see it like I do. But Dre just kept gazing up at the moon, feeling like it wrapped his vision in glittering rhinestones. Even if Jean was right, even though he isn't a vampire and maybe couldn't see the moon the same, what's a fake sparkle anyways? It's not wise to startle an immortal creature, Jean began, sensing Dre coming from behind him, his feet falling softly on the sand. You must be more afraid of me. Jean had a stern look in his eyes. It unsettled Dre as he sat down next to him. They gazed up at the moon. It was putting on another light show, trying to rival the sun again. Just for them, it seemed. Oh yeah, Dre began, a smirk on his lips. You're not scary to me, he said. Dre remembered Jean gasping for air as he awoke from his slumber, grabbing a rat running by them and sucking it dry. But now, Jean furrowed his brows and pointed up at the moon. You must be caught in its trance. Suddenly, Jean pulled a knife from the inside of his jacket. It was paper thin but long and looked effective with the symbol of the sun on its hilt. Here, Jean said while looking up at the moon, an untrustworthy look in his stare. Hesitantly, Dre took the knife and joined him in gazing again. Immediately, he could feel it calling him out to sea. So, if the moon looks different for you than it does for me, what does it look like? Dre asked, his own dark skin glimmering blue under the light. His big head was still thinking about what Jean had said the other night, wondering about the mysteries of the deep, deep dark. Jean sucked his top teeth, as if he didn't want to say, as if it wasn't worth his time to say, as if the moon wasn't gleaming, glittering, and glowing, blinking like a diamond watch. Dre shook his head and then leaned on Jean. Even though he was supposed to be afraid of him, he couldn't muster the fear. Not when Jean had already walked into his heart and occupied space in his brain like a giant stone. It began to occur to Dre that maybe he should be afraid of Jean. Like, deathly afraid. He was a vampire, and he had been one for so long it was probably easy for him to find his way with any humans he came across. Get anything he wanted from them. Get away with anything. And what had Jean been getting away with in the time they'd been sitting with each other on the beach? But he couldn't think of a thing when all they'd been doing was talking. He carried the knife Jean had given him, paper thin, longer than his whole hand. He wondered how Jean had been carrying it unless it was constantly poking him somewhere. The knife didn't do any shining either, at least not like everything else did under this moon. Dre turned his head suddenly, hearing a loud noise that sounded like a tire screech. The part of the beach they found each other on was so far away from the road, Dre thought it couldn't be that. Yet still, he gripped the handle of the knife tighter, squaring his stance as he looked around, ready for action. But the noise didn't come again, and there was nobody around until he saw Jean walking from the dark horizon. Blood spattered diagonally across his skin. He licked his lips and took a seat on the sand next to Dre. So, you want me to be afraid of you? No, I don't want that, but you should be, Jean said, stripping his clothes and bathing in the shallow parts of the ocean where it licked the land and got sand in its mouth. I am more than 70 years your senior, with more power than 200 men combined. I eat your kind for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and my eyes are sharper than any animal on earth and much, much sharper than human eyes. It's why I can see the moon like I do. She's staring down on you and me, even now. She's been looking at us. Looking at us, Dre asked, repeating his last sentence. He watched as Jean dipped his hand underneath the water and shook himself off. Watched as he walked from the water back onto the sand where Dre was sitting, the crescent moon hanging like the sharp end of a scythe in the night, still glittering and gleaming, blinking in front of them as if to show itself off. Why us? Dre had finally processed. And why the knife? He asked. He'd been fiddling with it in his hands. The knife is just a gift, Jean said, laying his heavy head on Dre's shoulder. But it likes you, I see. And it probably shines better under the sun. And the moon? It still beckoned him. And tonight, he had half a mind to heed its call and enter the dark waters of the sea. Instead, he could feel himself getting sleepy as he laid down next to Jean in the sand. "And you say I'm supposed to be scared of you," Dre said, though he was so tired it came out garbled. The truth was that he was afraid of him. He was more afraid of Jean than he'd been of anyone or anything he'd ever been afraid of in his life. But this kind of fear felt different, simpler, more profound. It was the fear of being naked that he got whenever he was around Jean, though Jean clearly didn't have that problem, Dre thought, as he fell asleep. "My child," Dre heard a voice so effervescent he would barely believe he was dreaming it. In his dreams, he saw Jean, wild-eyed and eyes wide, staring at something before them. "Why do you keep him from me?" The same voice again. The sound so sweet it smelt like roses. Dre stretched and rolled over in the sand. "Do not forget your place," the voice demanded. "He's mine." He dreamed that Jean had said this, his tone so sharp it could cut steel, sharper than the knife Jean gave him, which was still tucked away inside his jacket. "You may be able to put him in a trance, but not me." "I could take him myself, Jean." Dre recognized it was the voice of a woman who was glowing so brightly he couldn't see her face. "So why have you not done as you have been commanded to?" Jean stepped back and, in his dream, Dre could feel himself tightening his grip around the knife as he watched Jean widen his stance so that he stood between him and the glowing woman. And there, his dream stopped. Every vampire is slave to the glowing moon. She has ordained them as her people and kept them away from the sun, in return giving them unholy power. Jean was no different, another of the moon gazers that she had captured under her spell, granting immortality in exchange for their time under the sun. But Dre was different. "Why come here every night?" Jean asked. Another day had rolled into night. "Well, first it was because I thought I could find someone's old lost belongings and sell them to keep me afloat," Dre thought about it. "Now, because I know that some nights I might run into you," he smiled, thinking back to the strange dream he had last night when he'd fallen asleep on the sand, thinking how real it felt. "The moon. She wants you," Jean said as a matter of fact. "I can see how she looks at you every night. She dreams of taking you, but it seems the sun keeps you, wants you even more. Even though I can't see it, I see its light all over you. You must be his warrior." Jean sighed out deep, pointing to the knife he'd given Dre, which he brought with him even tonight. And even if Dre couldn't see the moon like Jean could, even if his vision was rhinestones and Jean's was diamond, even if he would never see sharp enough to see all that was going on, he could see just fine. The moon blinking in front of him seemed to be asking him out to sea. Jean took his hand fiercely, and they sat together just before sunrise.
Thank you, Duane. Next up, we have Sumiko Saulson. Sumiko is a Bram Stoker-nominated poet for their 2022 collection, The Rat King, a book of dark poetry, and an award-winning author of Afro-surrealist and multicultural sci-fi and horror, whose latest novel, Happiness and Other Diseases, is available from Mocha Memoirs Press. We also have several hard copies of their books on the back table, so please welcome up Sumiko.
So I did bring my most recent book of poetry, Melancholia, but then I printed out a sci-fi kind of story that is sort of sexy. So by show of hands, who wants the poetry?
Sexy.
Who wants the sexy stuff?
Sexy.
Okay, cool. Okay. The Mysterious State of Weenus. This is the Weenus Trilogy, Part 1. Angelo's birth. The first attempt at creating an artificial intelligence wasn't very sophisticated. That was before scientists learned how to map neural pathways using quantum physics. Why start from scratch when you can duplicate what nature has already created for you? They began experimenting with human synapses and the impulses that flowed between them, trying to unlock the way we work. However, none of these experiments seemed to come to fruition. The artificial intelligence, once disconnected from its host, lost its ability to feel and think individually. So what we were left with were not complete beings, but symbiotic creatures that could only function when attached to a biological. The simple early versions of these symbiotic AIs were attached to animal brains. They were wetware, holographic pets that interacted well with your dog Fido or your cat Fuzzy because they were generated by microchips implanted in the animal's brain. The chips created simulated creatures based on your pet, a sort of alternate version of the creature. Why clean 2 litter boxes when Mittens could play with her holographic buddy? Why walk or feed 2 dogs when you could have a real one with a holographic interactive companion? Then they began to experiment on humans. And of course that's gonna lead to sex, we know how that goes. The earliest human symbiotic AIs were not much more complicated than the pets, but they included additional useful medical functions and internal GPS locators and other practical tools to assist the person. The creatures could be confusing. They relied on your own memory banks and emotional responses for their personal store of potential responses. That meant they were incapable of feeling anything you couldn't feel. In a way, they were like split personalities. The human host would have to interact regularly with the symbiotic robot. The union was something the marketing executives and pop psychology pundits termed weenus. The more sophisticated the bots became, the more human their responses and the more organic the sense of bonding to your mechanical passenger. Why would anyone want to purposely split their own personality with an electronic device? Well, Weebots seem just like people in almost every way. Sure, every once in a while, your Weebot would pause to search your memory banks for the appropriate answer to something, causing its program to stall like an old video on the internet back in the dial-up days. Eventually, the Weebot would fetch the information and keep on chatting. They were wonderful companion programs. The medical uses were numerous. The machines monitored your heart rate, your blood pressure, your blood sugar, and put you on a life-saving diet and exercise regimes. They adjusted your taste in food so that you no longer craved all the salt that raised your blood sugar or the sugar that made your grandmother diabetic. Electronic caregiving Weebots were popular among the elderly and disabled. They were sociable as a nurse and affectionate as a cat. In fact, a cat was a popular form of the Medi Weebot. Imagine a talking feline who answered the door for you if you weren't feeling up to walking down the hall. People started attaching the Medi Weebots to their feline or canine companions after a while. It was not long, of course, before the sexually functional versions of these human meat and silicone chip bots were created. The erotic companion would slide in and out of the mind of its host human, discovering his or her most secret and craved fantasies. I know some people joke about the erotic models, calling the male models Bob or battery-operated boyfriend after the old vibrator joke. I am not ashamed of my personal tin man. His name is Angelo because he looks like an angel to me when his face flashes under my face. I can see him there laying under my skin, holographic overlays in his long, slender, blue-black fingers like gloves over my shorter, plumper mahogany ones. He draws himself over me and holds me with arms of my own. Now, it might sound creepy to some, letting an electronic man control your body, but he knows how to control it, if you know what I mean. He sure can give a hand job and He knows how to rock an orgasm when we're going solo, with or without an additional prop, if you know what I mean. No vibrator is necessary because he can manipulate my body from the inside. Just one thing is starting to bother me about him. It's how he acts towards Peter. Peter is my friend with benefits. Not saying that our relationship isn't satisfying, because Peter is really the man when it comes to knowing how to satisfy a woman in bed. Peter is stocky like Horace with caramel skin and long wavy hair. Yes, I did all the flavored things in here. And soft pouting lips below a narrow mustache. He spends most of his spare time at the gym, and it shows. His rock-hard abs and his firm, round-bottom ring remind an athlete and not a businessman. He packs a lot of heat in the bedroom, well endowed, and he knows how to use it. It's not just wham bam thank you ma'am with him. He takes time with kissing, touching, deep tissue massages that leave me feeling like every muscle in my body has been reborn. If he wasn't who he is, maybe we could have something serious. But Peter is a busy man, an international jet setter who told himself long ago that he never wanted to settle down. I know he has a woman in every port, but when he's here in San Francisco, he's all mine for the week or two that he's in town. Then it's off on business again. Ironically, he's a big software developer, not on anyone else's payroll, but a CEO. He works for one of the foremost Weebot companies in the nation. So at first I thought it was him doing something. I was sure he was teaching Angelo his techniques in bed. Had he downloaded something into Angelo, or was I hallucinating? Sometimes when Angelo and I were doing our thing alone in the bathtub, he would shoot a play-by-play memory of Peter dicking me down so hard I couldn't walk the next day. Well, walk straight at least. I would just be laying there in my bubble bath, quivering, a mess. Where did he learn this? Did he pay attention when Peter and I were fucking? I did not think he could learn these things on his own. Then one day, we were making breakfast together. Angelo started to speak to me all on his own. Usually he waited for me to prompt him. I'm a person, you know, he mumbled under his breath. A person? Not like you, but still a person. I stood back and looked at his holographic form standing a few feet away from me. His long, narrow face and high cheekbones gave him a regal look. He often looked serious. Today, he looked downright pensive. His beautiful eyes were almond-shaped, chocolate-browned, and surrounded by such a thick fringe of short black eyelashes that it looked like he was wearing eyeliner. He was tall and leanly muscular, like a hieroglyphic image of Ra or Osiris. He wasn't thick and muscular like Peter. He had a small upturned nose, round lips, and an overall sensitive, poetic look. Do you wish I looked more like Peter? He asked suddenly, almost jealously. Goodness no, I protested. They customized your appearance from a painting I made. You look just like I wanted you to. Okay, he said carefully, almost pouting. But if I look the way you want me to look, then why do you need him and not just me? I laughed. Angelo, you're a robot. You're not supposed to be jealous. I don't think you understand me, he complained. First of all, I'm not a robot. I'm a cyborg. I am robotic and organic, a being made from your physical material. You probably don't know how we-ness works. I have the same feelings you do, or maybe not the same, but they stem from your mind, so, you know, related, I get my emotions from you. I shook my head. You're starting to scare me a little. I told him, I don't want to have to take you back to the factory for reprogramming. Am I?
That's 9 minutes.
Oh shoot, I'm so sorry. I went over the time.
They're gonna have to buy the books.
Okay.
I forgot my paper. Wait a minute.
We should open the front door, get the little cold air in here real quick. Maybe. Wait a little bit.
Right here.
I lost track of time. That's good. Y'all gonna have to buy the book. Okay, next. Now we have Mr. Shawn Taylor. Shawn Taylor is a pop culture scholar, co-founder of Oakland's Black Futurist movement, and a senior fellow with the Pop Culture Collaborative. He is a storyteller, he is a Moth Story Slam winner, and a theater maker. His new solo show, called Speak and Carry, will debut in the summer of 2025. Please welcome Shawn Taylor.
I feel like a flight attendant looking at, we're gonna come this way, is it this way? It looks like an airplane right here. So I'm gonna read an essay. It's the anniversary of my grandfather's death tomorrow. And when Jenee read about Star Trek, and I was like, you know what, I was gonna read a piece of fiction. I'm not a fiction writer, I'm a scholar, so I don't wanna read you anything boring. But this is an essay about my grandfather. Oh. Aside from being the most physically powerful man that I've ever known, my maternal grandfather was also the first nerd of color I ever met. He was enamored of all things weird, off-center, having to do with outer space, other worlds, or the possibility that a monster just might rise out of the sea. He was my gateway drug to science fiction. My grandfather is directly responsible for getting me hooked. It started with television, it started with Star Trek. The earliest, actually the most coherent memory that I have of my grandfather is of us in my grandparents' front room watching the Arena episode of the original Star Trek series. I'm not sure what triggered it, but he had some serious issues with the Gorn, and the Gorn are like these little lizard people. My grandfather was Jamaican, so the Gorn them, they make the devil look handsome. He said in his thick Jamaican accent, born for hell. I distinctly recall not being able to fully follow the action as my grandfather continued to heap insult upon insult of the fog fuckers. I hadn't been saying anything, but he put his hand over my mouth and ordered me to shh when Captain James Tiberius Turk confronted the Gorn for the climactic battle. Dat man there, Captain Kirk, him the only white man I like. When Kirk defeated the Gorn and the Metron transported Kirk back to the Enterprise, all of his wounds healed, my grandfather yet let out a yip of joy. He patted me on my back and told me that Star Trek was how the future should be. Years later, when Star Trek the Motion Picture was released, he refused to take me. I begged him for days, but he was steadfast in his no. And when he said no, it was like any Starship captain saying shields up. Unless your weaponry was better, nothing was getting through it. I went to see the movie with a friend and his family and told my grandfather all about it. He shook his head the entire time, and when I finished, he sat me down and hit me with the following. When you make space the size of space, you cheat it. But when you put space in someplace small like that TV there, it makes it more meaningful. I had no idea what the hell he meant. I still don't. But he was pretty adamant that science fiction should only be on television. Through the years, he and I shared many a sci-fi rerun. Star Trek, The Outer Limits, the British Spy-Fi show, The Avengers, Twilight Zone, Thunderbirds, The Wild Wild West. His pure glee when he watched these shows was infectious. I became a fiend. We'd process each episode and he'd break down their larger social political meanings. He was my first critical thinking instructor, and he used science fiction television to sharpen my mind and observational skills. He was a wise old man. When I reflect on just how much he has influenced all aspects of my nerddom, not to mention my journey from project kid to magna and summa cum laude graduate school person, it is astonishing that he never completed the equivalent of the 3rd grade. And he was functionally illiterate. He was my #1 motivation to attain as many degrees as you can. You're a smart one, so you have to do it, or I'm gonna smack you. As you know, if you have immigrant parents, you gotta do some stuff. Or grandparent, anybody, you gotta either do what they say or you have to dodge punches. My involvement in school placed a non-hostile wedge between us. I frankly got smarter and started to explore things my grandfather had no context for. We both felt this, and I decided to fix this by teaching my grandfather how to read. We started with H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. We read this book so many times that I will never read it again. I still have the copy we practiced with, but I cannot read it. Too many tears from my grandfather when he couldn't immediately grasp reading fundamentals. But he persevered, eventually turning into a reading freak. He was never without an E.E. Doc Smith book in the front pocket of his ever-present coveralls. Then he discovered the Star Trek novels. It was over. His addiction increased to the point that he stopped attending church with my grandmother so that he could have an extra couple of hours to read the Trek book them. He'd devour the books and toss them down to me. I'd read them so that we could talk about them, but was not into them as I was into Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yes.
That was airing at the time. TNG rekindled my Trek love affair. Well, beginning with season 3, because the first 2 seasons are trash. For all this reading, my grandfather did not see one episode of TNG. If it's not Kirk, not Kia. I mean, not want another white boy in my life. Then, in 1993, Star Trek Deep Space Nine aired.
Yes.
My grandfather went bananas. I remember receiving a phone call from him that ignored the now 3-hour time difference between us. Boy! That new Star Trek, Spencer for Hire's man is the new captain. The man called Hawk is the captain. I can't believe it. His excitement down-registered when I informed him that Benjamin Sisko was not yet a captain. Why did they make the black man not a captain? Good question, grandfather. My grandpa passed away before the conclusion of the DS9, but watched the first 5 seasons. He was out of his skin when Sisko was made captain. It was as if one of his daughters got married to the perfect man. Like he personally won some type of jackpot. Right before he died, our last conversation naturally included Star Trek. Boy, I know you're not the father, but you're more son to me than your father. You're the captain of your own enterprise, and the future you make will be the best one you can make. Sisko and Kirk, you will make our world a better place. And so will you. I'm trying, Granddad. Thank you. How much time do I have? 2 minutes? I think I can get this story out. I don't write fiction, but it's my first fiction I've ever written, and it's, how many of you saw Black Panther? You know at the end of the movie when Black Panther reveals itself to the world? Yes. This is what happens if people immigrate to Wakanda. All right, let's see. All right, Nkalu and Zari had been in conversation for 26 hours. At the beginning of their discussion, several members from each of the tribes filled the raised seats of the chamber. The conclusion of the lore keeper and the ancestral geneticist discussion would fundamentally remake aspects of Wakandan life. Everyone wanted to make sure these changes would be beneficial to all. At the 10th hour, more than half of spectators removed themselves. At the 12th hour, only a handful remained. At the 26th hour, the aunt and her nephew were alone. They were just getting started, having exhausted the ritual banter that all Wakandan specialists engage in. Zani waved his hand in the chamber filled with a gigantic vibranium sand figure of a human body, overlaid with holographic representations of cellular structures. He reached into the figure's leg, pulled out a DNA strand, and unraveled it. He and his aunt were surrounded by the unspooled multicolored DNA. This, my aunt, this is where our story, our history is held. If each newcomer agrees to my genetic testing, it would be so easy to sort them into already existing tribes. And if enough of the newcomers have phenomenegenetic similarity, we could consider creating new tribes. With this, many new people, the formation of new tribes has to be considered. My aunt, please see the reason of this. He collapsed the figure, and 2 holographic images replaced it. Anthony Gautier and Malika Cruz. Born and living 3,000 miles apart, similar histories, similar genetic profiles, very similar life experiences. Why wouldn't they want to be grouped together? Why shouldn't they? His voice cracked on the last word. He was tired, but he was the younger, so he would not show his aunt the disrespect of slumping or sitting down. It seemed to him as if she hadn't moved an inch during their entire discussion. Don't want to take up too much time, but if you want this, it's a free story. You can look at wakandadreamlab.com. We have a bunch of free essays on there. Please check it out.
Thank you, Shawn Taylor. That was amazing. I have a quick little anecdote I have to say, because as Jenee mentioned, like she and I attended the Star Trek convention this year, but last year it was my first time going to a Star Trek convention in San Francisco, and Deep Space Nine. Jake, y'all remember Little Jake? Little Jake is tall now. Little Jake is 6'4", and Sirach Lofton is the actor's name, and he was there, and I met him, and I had tears in my eyes because I had a similar experience to you. My father actually retired from the Marine Corps, retired as a captain, and we had a very similar experience when my father turned on Deep Space Nine and saw Captain Sisko, and I shared that story with Sirach Lofton, and he got up from behind the table. They're not supposed to interact with the fans, because I had not paid for his autograph, but he was like, agent manager be damned. He was like, I'm hugging this woman, and Sirach and I had this really sweet moment, and he was like, we both had black captains as our fathers. Yeah, he already knows. We have pictures together. So anyway, I don't know if you all ever get over to Stanford, but Sirach now is part of a curriculum. They're teaching at Stanford Afrofuturism through the lens of Deep Space Nine. And it's sort of a big deal. So, yeah, so anyway, okay, I'm sorry. I just get emotional because Star Trek means a lot to those of us who had not previously seen ourselves in positions of power in space. So it's a thing. It's a big thing. Happy to talk about it here on our Black Futures History Afrofuturist event. So our final reader, Tamika Thompson, last but not least, a former journalist and producer. Tamika is author of Unshod, Cackling, and Naked, which is the 2024 Next Generation Indie Book Awards winner for horror, as well as the author of Salamander Justice. Her work has appeared in several speculative fiction anthologies, as well as in Interzone, Prairie Schooner, the New York Times, and the Los Angeles Review of Books, among others. She lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, where she hosts her own blog and newsletter, Tamika Talks Terror. Please welcome Tamika Thompson.
The story I'm going to read is called Bridget Has Disappeared. It is in this collection. The narrator, Yusef, he meets a woman and falls deeply, madly in love. The setting for the story is in the near future, before societal collapse. A lot of my work is pre-dystopian, because I believe we are living in a pre-dystopia, possibly even in a dystopia at this point. And so this is the moment where Yusef realizes that Bridget, his love, is not as perfect, perhaps, as she seems. In the kitchen, I popped open the champagne bottle and listened to the drip, splash, drip, and then silence as she entered the bath down the hall. I wanted to join her in there, but instead I cooked. Imagining her plump thighs wrapped around my waist, I got excited for the night ahead. After 20 minutes of stillness coming from the bathroom, I finally said, "The food is cooling off, and so am I." I chuckled. Silence. With a scoop of rice on the serving spoon in my right hand, I stopped and listened. The neighbor's dog barked. A television from down the hall blared out a car commercial. The vent above me hissed as air passed through. "Everything okay?" Nothing from the bathroom. No splashing, no voice, no dripping. I placed the utensil on the counter and tiptoed across our carpet to the bathroom door, wanting to be certain she hadn't fallen asleep. I imagined her leaning against the back of the tub, her head on the tile, her mouth open, and perhaps startling awake when I knocked. I rapped on the door. "Bridget?" The door moaned open. Steam poured out, moistening my face and neck. I scanned the mirror above the sink, expecting to see the image of Bridget curled in a ball in the water. What I saw was a tub full of water and no Bridget. Inside the bathroom, the scent of cinnamon enveloped me just as it did whenever I took her in my arms. Her robe hung on the back of the door untouched. A new razor sat in her jeweled soap dish, unused. I shook the shower curtain as if she were somehow wrapped in it. I knelt and dipped my hand in the lukewarm water. I considered pulling the stopper and draining the basin, but changed my mind, as if emptying the tub was acceptance that she'd disappeared. I examined the water. Where were the soap suds and shavings? An imprint of her foot remained in the slippers next to the tub. For a second, I slipped my feet inside. The house shoes were warm, but dry. She wasn't resting in our bedroom across the hall. She wasn't sitting in one of our side-by-side rocking chairs on the balcony. I didn't find her reclining on the black leather couch in the living room wrapped in her Chanel blanket. All of our windows were closed, locked, and were so rickety, had she opened them, they would have announced their movement to the entire apartment complex. She was nowhere. And when two people live in an 800 square foot, one-bedroom apartment, it's obvious to one when the other is gone. Uncertain what to do, I planted myself on the couch, stroked the blanket, and dialed her phone. My knees jerked up and down. My heart pumped so hard, I felt it in my throat. I didn't expect an answer, but at the time, calling her seemed logical. The phone vibrated in her handbag, which hung on the back of the dining room chair, and her voicemail answered. You've reached Bridget's phone, leave a message, or do like everyone else, hang up and send me a text. I didn't leave a message. What was there to say? Hey, you mysteriously vanished, call me. So I sat there, staring at the blank television screen, my knees still jumping up and down. The clock atop the TV said 9:45. I told myself if I didn't hear from her by midnight, I'd panic. Why midnight? Because passing into a new day with her still missing seemed ominous. In the meantime, I'd wait in our living room with my cell phone set to vibrate in my hand in case she called. From where? I was not religious, spiritual mostly, but didn't believe in ghosts, aliens, or anything remotely paranormal. I was a journalist who dealt in facts, data, spreadsheets. I didn't know what to think about where she went, but I blamed her. I thought of the scar, the origins of which she kept hidden. It wasn't that I thought her scar was related to her disappearance, but it certainly was a sign that, as intimate as our relationship was, there were parts of her I might never know. After an hour of intense fidgeting, I became exhausted and fell asleep. The sound of the spoon scraping the plate woke me. I opened my eyes, and there was Bridget, barefoot, in her bathrobe, with water dripping from her hair to her delicate neck, with her cinnamon-flavored cigarette in one hand, a tablespoon in the other, serving herself from the food I'd cooked. The clock now said 11:37 p.m. Where the hell were you? I stumbled to the kitchen, snatched the spoon from her, set it on the counter before her, took the cigarette from her, and placed it in that ashtray I bought for her. With the sting of tears in my eyes, I squeezed her face between my hands, pulled her to me, kissed her mouth, her cheeks, and eyebrows before she could answer. I tipped back her head and kissed the scar on her chin. Relief loosened the muscles in my neck and shoulders. She was real. In the tub! She smiled with both her mouth and eyes, but a question formed on her eyebrows. No, you weren't. I peppered my words into her face. I looked for you all over the apartment. I didn't see you. I didn't mean to shake her with every word. She peeled away my palms and stepped back. You must have been dreaming. I wasn't dreaming, I was cooking. I took her left hand, the one sporting the flawless, round solitaire that cost all 5 years of my savings, and shoved it in the middle of the rice. Feel, the food is cold. Her eyes wide, she removed her hand and licked the flakes from her fingers. Seth, chill. Chill? It's been almost 2 hours. It was a long bath. I want the truth. You're scaring me. I'm scaring you? I realized I was screaming. We stared at each other, my breathing erratic. She placed her hands over her mouth and diamond-shaped tears appeared in the corners of her eyes. I'd never seen her cry and knew if she did, I'd say or do whatever I needed to make her stop. It was unlike any argument I'd had. I could deal with, you're always working, or you never pay attention to me, like with my ex Sherry. I didn't know how to deal with, you went missing for a couple of hours from our windowless bathroom. How could this be happening? Look, no woman is perfect. From that first whirlwind of a night, I figured she'd have a flaw, but I imagined it'd be something I could handle. Too flirty with my friends, or too controlling or irresponsible with money. She was none of that. She was perfect for me, except now, perhaps not. Suddenly, I couldn't believe I'd moved in with her so quickly, proposed to her so quickly, spent all my money on her so quickly. I loved her laugh, her quick wit, the way she lived in the moment and didn't fret about the past or future, but what was her story? Her real story. One of those diamond tears fell, and I couldn't look at her any longer. Forget it. I went to bed and lay in the dark, staring out the window. Orange headlights slid from right to left as cars made their way down our busy street. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was me. Maybe I really had fallen asleep and dreamt it all. I have been pretty stressed at work and about the cost of our wedding. When she got into bed, she pressed her nude body against my clothed one. She spooned me, lifting my t-shirt and placing a clammy hand on my stomach. Her skin felt warm and supple, but with the sweat evaporating from her body, leaving her cool and damp. Is it possible to be warm and cool at the same time? I always loved that sensation, except for this night, when I knew she'd not taken that bath. I feel like you're angry with me. Her breath caressed my neck, giving me a chill and making me firm. I'm not, I said, without turning toward her. But I was angry. It was a bizarre, unjustified anger that created silences and voids that had the potential to reveal too much of how I felt when I didn't know how I felt at all. We fell asleep that way, and that was the first night in the year I'd known her that we did not make love. Thank you.
Wow. So, I don't know, so how many people here, this is your first experience of Afrofuturism? Anyone? Oh, thank you for coming and for being honest about that. I think, was it Jim? Somebody recently on Facebook, I posted something about black horror, and somebody said, oh, black horror, that's a new genre for me. And I'm like, I'm glad to bring it to you. So, you know, under the umbrella of speculative fiction, there is horror, there is science fiction, there is fantasy, there's all kinds of subgenres, sword and soul, and cyberpunk, and, you know, all these things, solar funk, solar punk. So yeah, I hope that we can continue to do these kinds of events, and we can bring up these new kinds of genres and continue to expose you to the wonderful array of local authors. Everyone here is from the San Francisco Bay Area. So I want to thank you to Christine, who owns the bookshop. I want to thank Kyle and Becky and like everyone, Kathy, Jacalyn, like all the local poet laureates that, you know, everyone has like been such a welcoming community to us. And I'm going to read one poem. This is from, it's actually a textbook. This was put together, it's called Conjuring Worlds, an Afrofuturist textbook. And my friend B. Charisse Moore put this together. She's been a longtime educator, and she wanted to have a textbook for people who are homeschooling their children. So this is for middle school to high school. And we've actually had a few college professors ask if they could use this for their college curriculums. So anyway, there's a QR code if anyone is a teacher and interested in the textbook. There's a QR code up front there where Kyle is. But I have a poem in here. Being from North Carolina, I wrote about the Great Dismal Swamp, and I'm going to read that. So my author's note is, close to where I grew up in North Carolina, a swamp runs along the western side of Highway 17, just north of Elizabeth City and further north across the Virginia border to the Chesapeake Bay. This swamp is called the Great Dismal. Original size estimates are around 1,400 square miles. The Great Dismal Swamp plays a huge role in the history of American slavery, as escaped slaves such as Nat Turner and Dred Scott sought their personal safety and liberation by hiding and living in swamps for extended periods of time. The style of this poem is in honor of Langston Hughes' lyrical rhyming poetry, and the last line is directly inspired by Langston Hughes' poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers. So what's cool about this is that on the right-hand side, there's like all these exercises that you can do with students, like what's history's role in addressing climate change, and do individuals have a responsibility to preserve the environment, and why? And then there's like word builder section to build vocabulary, words they might not have heard before that are in the poem. So it's pretty cool. Okay, on to the poem. I'm saturated sponge of land, soaking up all where the waters seep. I'm lazy lift of alligator eyelid, slow to rouse from dark, dank sleep. I'm drawled out groan of lily pad protests as fat bullfrogs slowly leap. I'm squelch of soil under feet that never rush, always creep. I'm overflow of displaced sorrow, death visits often, always on the reap. I'm stretched wide from Carolina's Cape Fear up north to Virginia's Chesapeake. I'm your first stop, only chance, last resort to escape the master's keep. I've lost count of the bodies I hold, but each one housed a soul grown deep. Thank you, everybody. told that we'd love to do some Q&A, and that the bookshop, I think, is at Meg, has some questions maybe for our readers, and we're open to audience. Does anyone in the audience, first of all, have any questions? Anybody? I'll pass it over to you, Meg. Or is that okay?
Okay, I'll ask them.
Yes, okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Abba.
Come on, come on.
Okay. So, hello everyone. Our first question is, in one sentence or in 3 words, what does Afrofuturism mean to you? And we can go around in a circle if that works. Do you want to start? Sure.
To me, because I grew up in an environment where our blackness is being denied, what it has meant and means to me is just creating a new reality for my personal experience, and also, I don't know, I grew up with Star Trek too, and being able to think about the future is just what you need to hold on to sometimes.
I think it means, for me, freedom, kind of what NK was saying, and having no boundaries, and be able to create a world, or create characters. And I mean, Octavia Butler talked about that. Like, that's why she liked this genre, because there were no boundaries, and as Black people, there's so many limits put on us. And I think the power, and I was talking earlier about the power of imagination. And like, no matter what our ancestors went through, they still had their imagination. They still envisioned a future. And I think right now, with everything going on in the country, Afrofuturism and having a futuristic thinking is critical for us to progress and to get out of the mess that is outside these doors. So to keep imagining, break those gender boundaries and racial boundaries and all those other boundaries put on us.
A conduit to reconfigure the past into the future.
For me, it's imagination. It is seeing more, seeing beyond, basically.
To me, Afrofuturism is an acknowledgement that Black people exist in the future. I think that that's one of the reasons why it's so important to write fantasy that has Black people in it. A lot of the times when we look at fantasy books, I'm going to get a really short pedestal here because this is something I'm really passionate about. A lot of the times when we see fantasy books like The Hunger Games, right? This is set in a dystopian world where now resources are so sparse, these different districts are fighting for the resources. We have books like Dune, in which water is a scarcity, and so now people have to wear specific uniforms when they go outside that recycle the water in their bodies. And so these fantasy plots, they're in some way a blueprint as to, okay, if water runs out, do we need to make a suit that recycles the water in our body? And so to be able to see Black identities across all intersections in that future landscape becomes that much more important. It's kind of this blueprint.
Yeah, I was pretty much going to say something very similar, because you said in 3 words, and I would say our futures exist.
Yes.
Yeah, because the global demographic for this planet is 18% white folks and 18% Black folks. Honestly, most people are not Black or white on this planet. But when you look at sci-fi, a lot of times it's all white people, and it sends an unconscious message that the rest of us have somehow all died or whatever. And yeah, so this is kind of pushing back against it. We're here. We were actually the first people on Earth too, and we'll continue to be here.
I would say it is quantum narrative remixing.
Hey.
Oh.
I agree with all of that. I think that I would add the thing that I love about Afrofuturism is that it creates a space for us to come together in a tradition within which we can write that did not exist before Afrofuturism. I mentioned this at a recent event that when you take an Afrofuturist label and you put it onto an event, it creates an entire marketing strategy for people. People will come out for an Afrofuturist event. And I think that that is something for us as creatives, as writers, to get people excited about our work. And so that's one of the things that I love about it, in addition to the fact that I agree with all of this. We are imagining ourselves in the future. I think it's revolutionary, the Black imagination, to work outside of the white gaze, to work outside of characters being the default character as a white character. And for a lot of readers, I think that it is, it's almost like I'll meet people and they'll say, oh, you know, I didn't realize your character was Black until I got to page, you know, because the default in their mind is that it's a white character. So I think Afrofuturism is so revolutionary because you can't make that assumption when you pick up one of our works.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Actually, being Black, I mean, I don't want to get Afrofuturism and African futurism confused because they're two separate streams.
Yeah.
But Afrofuturism, I mean, Black folks in America is an alien abduction story.
Yeah.
White folk with better technology goes to a land they've never been to before, decide to colonize that land, decided to strip that land of resources and bring that back across the Mayat, back to the United States. But that we are still here is now a superhero story. That's a different question, different conversation.
On that note, I just want to add one thing. To me, you know, there's an African philosophy of Sankofa, which is, you know, returning to the past, you know, to carry forth what you left behind into the future. And to me, when I think of Afrofuturism, those two things are inexplicably intertwined and interwoven. And so it's our way, like with the poem that I just read, like looking back at the Dismal Swamp and how it became a land-based, effective liberation strategy for slaves. So looking to the past and gleaning what seeds of wisdom from our past we can take forward to make brighter futures.
Thank you for all your answers. Our next question is, which book, film, or piece of art first sparked your interest in Afrofuturism?
Octavia Butler, just,
Yes.
fledgling, I mean, every book. Octavia Butler, Octavia Butler, Octavia Butler.
I didn't even know Afrofuturism existed, and it wasn't until I went to college and I read magical realism, you know, which is like Latinx literature, magical realism, and then then I started digging, and then I had a professor, she had an Afrofuturistic class, but I was like, is people of color doing fantasy and just surreal work? So actually I was kind of introduced through Latinx literature. That's what led me to Afrofuturism, Afro-surrealism.
Yeah. Connected those, yeah, I guess my first conscious be like, oh, this is a thing, would be through Octavia Butler. Of like, oh, yes, oh my God, I love this. I love, whether that's Kindred or, you know, Parable from Sour. But I guess with not consciously thinking of it, of what it would be a thing, it would be the end of Deep Space Nine. And Cisco's Ascension, right. I mean, it was just wow. Cardi doing that.
Octavia Butler, I mean, she is one of the masters. But today, I mean, Wakanda, I love that, you know, it's just a wonderful story. But just back onto what you were saying about the past and bringing it to the future, and that's what I basically did with my story, thinking in terms of the hair. You know, there are stories and tales of, you know, Black slaves using braiding to map out roads to freedom to keep it from the masters, you know, and send messages through the hairstyle. So I just wanted to kind of take that and, you know, just carry it into the future, you know, as our way of traveling and continuing our secret stories and bettering ourselves.
This is a really good question, and thank you for it. I think one of the first pieces that I ever like really got into that was Afrofuturist was probably Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison.
Yes.
There's a part, and this is spoiling the end of the book, so if you haven't read Song of Solomon, please, yes, cover your ears. There's a part at the end of it where it's kind of up in the air if someone flew or not. They just kind of got wings and just got it into the air and started flying. And then I had to look it up, and it's actually the Flying Africans, which was a folktale that a lot of slaves said to each other, which I thought was really, 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 really interesting, because it then kind of opened up, wait, what are some other folktales that slaves told each other in that time period? And that brought me to John the Conqueror and a couple of other archetypes, maybe even, that I thought were really interesting. But I would say Octavia Butler for sure. I mean, I think for a lot of us, Octavia was like the Afrofuturist awakening, maybe without us knowing it, but Tananarive Due, I want to shout her out as well, because she is another amazing Afrofuturist writer who also delves a lot into horror. And then I really would be remiss if I didn't also shout out Janelle Monáe, which I do believe her work is really Afrofuturist in a lot of ways, especially with the Arc-Android series. So it's like Android trying to be human kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely yes on Toni Morrison. And I like the way that that particular work bookends, because it starts out with someone saying that they're going to fly and they jump out of the window, and at the end someone jumps off the cliff. Yeah, but, you know, I also think that, you know, for me with Deep Space Nine, I think that when Gabriel Byrne was in San Francisco and that whole episode would be it for me. How they just time traveled right over there, and the whole time travel question of, can you change these things? And I mean, I love horror, so it's very hard for me to sit here and not be thinking about like L.A. Banks or whatever. Yes, and you know, I'm gonna shout out, you know, also Nisi Shaw.
Yes.
Because queer Afrofuturism needs to be recognized.
I did my graduate work actually in Afrofuturism, and so for me, which led me from as a teacher, Chaim Goldman was an English teacher of mine, and I was a bad kid in school where I would just always get in trouble, and so he gave me 2 W.E.B. Du Bois stories, The Princess Steel and The Comet, which were written in 1926, 1925. And I was like, wait, black people are writing science fiction back then? And then fast forward to, and if we're not talking about Dr. Alondra Nelson, we're not talking about Afrofuturism, because she has basically popularized it in our eyes. But the term comes from Mark Derry, white journalist. But Dr. Alondra Nelson did the Afrofuturist listserv, back when we had listservs back in the day. And then from there was an issue of social text from Duke University, which was the first time academically Afrofuturism was ever put into a book. Now that it's going for like $1,000 a copy, which is ridiculous. But if you can find that, it's one of the most beautiful, it's kind of, when you're seeing an origin of a movement and it's actually captured, probably one of the most fantastic things. So for me, reading W. Du Bois, and then of course Kindred, because she time traveled to save herself. Oops, spoiler alert, but it's a 50-year-old book. It's a 50-year-old book, so if you haven't read it, I'm sorry. But yeah, so those are the things. But definitely W. Du Bois and those 2 short stories are just changed my life.
Once again, I agree with all of that. The first time that I imagined Black futures, and I'm dating myself a bit, was one of my early concerts was George Clinton, Bootsy Collins, and the P-Funk All-Stars. Mothership lands on the stage, and it was mind-blowing, I would say, to imagine Black people having some sort of future that was, you know, science fiction, but also where funk can heal you. that you can just lay your hand on the radio and somehow be healed of any ailment that you had. And so I'd say for me, the early impression of Afrofuturism before I even knew the term or knew what it was, I think would be through music. So I really appreciate that, Janelle Monáe, because I think that music especially has been revolutionary in Afrofuturism.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone who mentioned other genres. Afrofuturism definitely goes beyond literature into music. I'm thinking Stevie Wonder, his song As, I'm thinking Prince, I'm thinking Earth, Wind and Fire, fantasy, there's all that. But I have to say Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower, if you haven't read it, read it. Because I first read it going on 20-some years ago now. I think it came out in '94, she wrote it. But I randomly flipped it open yesterday. No, it was Wednesday, and I turned the page, and it's written like a journal, like, so it has a date, and the date said, I shit you not, Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. It is prophetic. It is prescient. It is everything that's happening right now. She's discussing the wildfires burning in LA. She's talking about the, president who promised that he would enact all these fascist laws. She's talking about all of that, and she wrote it in 1994. And she dates it to today's exact date. Please read this book.
Awesome, amazing. Next question we have is, if you could world build your perfect future, what's one thing it must have?
What's one thing my future must have? A free press. A press that is truly free. Community press, where people can tell the truth and not be killed for it.
3 hours of daydream time every day.
I mean, if it's a perfect future, I mean, I know it sounds like I'm at a pageant, but like, could we just end world hunger? I mean, and getting rid of wars, that'd be good too.
My perfect future, if I could world build, I would say in my perfect future, homophobia, sexism, racism would all be dead.
For me, it would just be freedom, just the true feeling of freedom, being free, not having any restraints, any racism, free of all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's funny, I was originally going to say, like, disentangle it, one from just capitalism, maybe even just all kinds of these economic, like, systems that are exploitative. But, yeah, I mean, yeah, just, I guess, a recognition and, I'm like, what is the best word for it? I don't know. But like I guess equity of distribution of resources. Yeah.
Yeah, all of that freedom. Equal resources for everybody. It's funny. I had a poem about that, but I didn't read because I didn't have time. But I was also thinking of Hidden Figures, and I see so many articles of kids of color who have created created so many innovative things, and I'm like, let's have equity in education, because I really believe, and I'm thinking of Hidden Figures, that movie. I think if Black women were allowed to just do their thing, we would be so far advanced in space exploration. If we just had the chance. So just let everybody have equal education, because there's scientists and doctors and people that got cures, and they can't do it because they're oppressed. But we would be so far ahead in health and medicine and science if we had equal education on this planet.
I think my perfect future would be a world where we finally are all really cognizant that we're all connected. Not just human beings, but every living being yeah, that we actually really, yeah, that we feel it, we know it, and so we don't harm ourselves any further.
And that is such an important, that's so important what you just said about being connected, because I mean, we're all breathing the same air. People just don't stop and think. Just because we're different on the outside, we are breathing the same air, you know, and it's going in and out of each of us. So to me, just this hatred and the ugliness, and it's hard to understand. It's just hard to understand.
If you don't realize we're connected after COVID, something's wrong with you.
I know.
It is fundamentally wrong with you.
I'm just going to quickly say nap time. Rest. I think that you cannot dream, you cannot imagine if you're not rested. So built-in siesta.
Yes.
Yeah, I especially second that nap time. I work as a teacher, and the little kids get to nap, but the adults don't. Doesn't seem fair.
I take a nap.
We have an audience.
You all mentioned music, and you named off some good artists, but maybe can somebody talk a little bit about the creation of music? Because a lot of times it comes from, if we're talking hip hop, if we're talking techno, if we're talking house, we're talking about people who are teenagers, and you know, when this started and looking at combating really oppressive conditions, and I'm looking at the brilliance of the Black imagination, more than just creating music, but the technology that went into, you know, not having instruments, but creating something that all of us are eating off of today. I would like to see somebody maybe connect those dots, because that Black imagination, it goes down one of two paths. Either it's criminalized, or now it's coming up, everything we did in hip hop was either seen as bad or criminal, or it's not recognized until somebody else does it. So you look at the people in Detroit doing techno, it only really gets shine, and people talk about innovativeness when it shows up in Vegas with some other people, you know, doing that, and then they're like, oh, these guys are brilliant. But I'm looking at kids that are coming out of a place, they're not thinking Afrofuturism, but they're creating a world for themselves, from the graffiti to the music and the scene that's around it. So I wanted to see if somebody could maybe build on that a little bit more.
I think one thing that's really interesting about that is you look at Jamaica, right? Because Kingston, Jamaica, there's part of the ports that were business zones and junk zones where they just dropped, Panasonic would drop their stuff off, JVC dropped their stuff off. And so what people did, early dancehall artists would actually hop the fence, take this equipment that was half broken, but still make it work. And that's why we get dub music from. You know, that's how dub music starts. It starts from broken machinery.
And that's the same thing with hip-hop.
Hip-hop. Or we go to Detroit and talk about Juan Atkins and Drexy and all those guys in Detroit. He was like, I want to know what kind of music will machines listen to. And then we get techno from that, which doesn't get looked at as Detroit, Midwestern, Chicago corridor. It gets looked at as some European thing where all they did was listen to the albums that came up from the 80s, from Juan Atkins and all those guys, and Jason and all those guys, and they made their own watered-down, non-political version of it. And so the Black imagination is a great Sly Stone documentary on Hulu you have to watch. It's fantastic. But what the Black imagination does, it's almost a self-protective coping mechanism to deal with it. I mean, think about it. That we are all here right now means that white supremacy isn't all-powerful. We should not be in this room writing on laptops and computers and making music and things, because every single thing since we came here has tried to kill us. But you tried to kill us, we made the blues. We're going to tell you how sad we are because you're trying to kill us. Then we made jazz. We took God from the sky and gave it into our voices. Then you said we're poor, but we're going to make hip-hop out of it, because out of poverty. That hip-hop comes out of people who wanted to kill each other, decided not to anymore, is fantastic. And then we go on from there, and then we have the Afrofuturist movement, we have the African Futurist movement, we have the African Juju movement. What the Black imagination does, it acts as a protective agent. So when we are in times of major crisis, we create something brand new. And what I'm worried about for Afrofuturism is that it's going to go the way that hip-hop did, where you're going to have like Alfie, the Afrofuturist bear, on a commercial selling cereal. like we did before. And that's what I worry, because it's a nascent art, it's a nascent genesis of this art, that the co-option is already kind of there a little bit. And I can answer what I won't right now, but the reality is we'll make something new. And we have to stop looking at these as like subcultures. Afrofuturism is black folk culture. Hip-hop is black and Latinx folk culture. And it's not youth culture. So we start understanding that we will always generate, because that's just how fly we are. So that's what I think this, like, what we've done with these movements is that we've been able to protect and insulate ourselves from the outside world by creating things that weren't even a thought prior.
Yeah, because, you know, since you walked in here, I was looking at you and I was like, wow, that dude looks like Davey D. But, yeah, because me and you and my mom used to do a thing called the African American Multimedia Conference back in the 1990s, and then I was on the, KMEL with you and, Public Enemy and stuff. And I just want to say that, access to technology is political, and Afrofuturism is a future wherein we have, access to things, but, the digital divide, which is what we were working on back then, it still exists. So, it has become smaller because now people have a little computer in their pocket, which is a cell phone. And back then, we were all sitting there trying to teach people Cubase and Pro Tools. And honestly, music was a big motivating factor for getting young black people to learn how to use tech when we had the multimedia conference, because it was something that they cared about that made them want to learn about technology. But I think that we got to think about capitalism and how that works, especially with Elon Musk doing all this the dirty deeds that he's doing, okay? I'm not a Marxist, but Marx talked about the means of production. The means of production is technology that has software on it that all of these people that are currently sucking up to Trump control. Mark Zuckerberg controls the tech. You know what I'm saying? So we got an additional problem, which is that the things that people are creating their music and putting their music out in the world on, like SoundCloud and stuff like that, can be potentially very easily silenced and censored because the minute that the government controls the corporations with the money, I mean, that's why they were going after TikTok. They're going to tell you it's because they're afraid that the Chinese government is spying on us, and it's really because they actually only want technology that they can control. And you see how fast Trump bought it back as soon as he could get his fingers in that pie. So I think that music is something that is encoded. It's like using a code that only we can crack, because things like hip-hop use terminology that the people that are oppressing us cannot immediately understand what is being said. I mean, it is rooted in poetry. It is rooted in spoken word. So this goes way back, and I agree with you that it is not, all about youth culture too, because, could you imagine someone telling James Baldwin that he should stop, you know what I'm saying, because he was getting old? No. That's why we're all sitting here being old writers, because people keep telling you it's a young person's game, and that is a way to cut off the oral traditions going from generation to generation. Would you tell, Maya Angelou to shut up because she was old? No, that would never happen. So people need to learn to respect their elders and not let the generational divide become something that makes it so that our young people are being taught by the people who have appropriated our culture and not us.
I guess I just wanted to speak a little bit on lived experience, because I know that that's a really big part of my writing and why I do fantasy based on my intersection of identity What we see, I think, a lot of the times with Blackness and its in its relationship to art is speaking about that lived experience, and I think it's one of the reasons why hip hop and why a lot of other musical genres created by Black folks really speak to the world in a lot of ways, because we're also speaking about ourselves. And one thing that I've learned as an artist, I would say, is that vulnerability is like universality. And I think the more vulnerable you can get in your own writing, the more it can be felt in other spaces. And I think the same thing in music as well. The more vulnerable that you get into your experiences as a musical artist, the more folks can understand. So yeah, I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Can I ask one thing too? I know we're talking about music, but with us as Black folks, it's never just the music, right? It's always the dance. It's always various aspects to the oral tradition. And I hear what you're saying about the control, but what I'm seeing in my classrooms and with the youth I'm working with, yeah, they do this, they're on SoundCloud, but they're doing movement work. There's a lot of new dances and a whole lot of other ways in which people are bonding and communicating that's outside of, like, I'm not trying to get on SoundCloud. Like, I just talked to a bunch of youth today, and they were not only inspired by seeing what Kendrick did, not because everybody was paying attention to Kendrick's lyrics and what he was putting in, but these folks were looking at the Turf Fiends and looking at these movements, and their goal right now is like building so that they can be doing these movements in other places. And that to me is like, oh, that's the reinvention. You're controlling this, but you can't control my body, can't control how me and you communicate with each other, and I think that is the beauty of it. So it may be we reinventing something as somebody controls, you know, the surface thing. It ain't about music for a lot of people, like rapping no more. It's a whole other thing. That's what I'm seeing.
It's a whole other thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like, you asked that question, I got super excited because it's connected to one of the poems and what I read with a larger project that's a part of it. So they wouldn't have the black holes in it. Well, I don't know why I didn't mention this. Afrofuturism in music. Deltron 3030.
Oh yeah,
ooh, yes. But
classic.
Black holes. I'm trying to connect these things. So, black holes were pulling in all light, all these things around, collapsing to singularity, everything there. Oh, what's going on? What's happening with these black holes? Like, you know, why do they exist? What's happened on like one of the recent things in the last 5 or 6 years, were those like photos, and it's like, oh, there's this emergence, something's happening on the other side of this singularity. To me, that is all directly connected to hip hop. So Evie Shockley has I cannot remember the name of the book, but it's like it's drawing these connections between like the Black musical tradition and literary work. And one of the things that was so key to my understanding from that was she uses this specific phrase of like, yeah, talking about like Black musical tradition and the fact that, I mean, it's conjunctive, it's not disjunctive, like it's all related. So it like that's where the source is. It's all this just like, we're bringing in everything that was before from the oral tradition. Like that's from the progression, like, you know, you mentioned, oh, you know, the blues is so deeply embedded in everything after, you know, the way hip hop is so embedded in everything after. When you mentioned, you said earlier, what was it, quantum narrative remixing? I was like, oh my God, this remix, why did I miss this word? There's this law of quantum computing called the second law of quantum computing. And it's this idea, well, not an idea, it's what happens with quantum computing. It's the qubits and things that are within there. Eventually, after billions and billions and billions of iterations, things start to repeat in the same patterns, much in the same way that you know, it's essentially remixing. You see, you know, what Nas does with all of his work. He's constantly like his whole. Anyway, everybody does it, but his like specific aesthetic is all around remixing and creating this like autobiography that like is his own history and work and sampling and resampling his samples like the songs, and that is what happens with computing. There's these proposals in quantum physics now that's like, oh, this is probably what's happening on the other side of these black holes, and where everything is pulling in goes a singularity, coming back on the other side, essentially remix. And so the core of that poem is that at that singularity, it's all dense, contains everything, and it's black.
We have time for one more question. Thank you all. This has become an intellectual discussion. I love it. Last question.
Our last question is, what's the most exciting theme that you're currently exploring in your work? And we'll start Oh, is that side? Oh, sorry.
I am still not over horror films, especially because of just all the new black horror that is out there and amazing, and just, yeah, the new vision that's there. So I can't stop. I'll just continue.
Two things. So I'm launching a radio show for KLW in a few weeks. We'll be a 1-hour weekly show on arts in the Bay Area, so I'm really excited about that. So right now, that's kind of where my brain is, because we're getting ready, we're practicing. So my writing, as far as for the scripts and everything, is dedicated to that. But as far as my poetry, I'm working on this idea of something called like the resurrection of the dying butterfly. It's because I was going through something and I saw a butterfly dying, and I wrote all the stuff that inspired it. So this idea of resurrection, like that piece I wrote about the hysterectomy I had. So yeah, so coming from something like that, some trauma like that infused with surrealism.
Yeah, two things. One, I guess, is that book of poetry, but it's also becoming like essays about the larger things in the poetry, like quantum complexity as a poetry form and as like a way of thinking, and also just another essay that's a mini doc on what does it mean to be a black poet in San Francisco.
I'm working on a couple of projects, another collection of short horror, mystery thrillers. I just love that genre, and poetry collection.
I think most recently I have been really interested, so contextually, I'm a mama's boy, so I love my mother to death, we're best friends, you know, all of that thing. So in fantasy though, I'm kind of interested in exploring that dynamic of a relationship.
So since I came out as a non-binary person like 5-6 years ago, I have been writing all the stories about black trans people. The happy ones, the sad ones, the funny ones. Lots and lots of ones that have sex and threesomes, because I just like to write about those things. And who doesn't, right? But also, this book of poetry got on the preliminary ballot for the Stoker Awards, and they will announce the final ballot on the 23rd, which is like, what, or isn't that like tomorrow? Yeah, I think that's what they said. So, yeah, I think that I'm gonna find out if it's on the final ballot, so wish me luck.
Three things. I have a solo show coming out this summer called Speaking Carrie. It's about how we mourn. It's actually a lot funnier than it sounds. Then I am working on a book on Black Whimsy. And then I have a book coming out on Father's Day called The Alphabet for New and Expecting Fathers.
Can you talk more about that show?
So it's a show, I got a grant to do a show about how we grieve. And I'm like, grief is easy, mourning isn't. And so I wanted to really talk about how we mourn. And it's a hybrid show. There's a part where I'm doing monologue, essays, yada, yada, yada on stage. And then I actually invite audience members up to mourn with me. And so they can say, and there's some technology involved. We're going to build a digital ritual altar out of computer projection and stuff. So that's
when and where.
Hopefully, if it's at the Marsh. Hopefully, if all goes well. But if not, I'm going to rent out a place and do it because I have a nice AV crew and everything, and it's going to be fantastic. Actually, it sounds very arrogant, doesn't it? No, it's going to be dope. Never mind. Yeah, it's going to be good.
It will be fantastic. We already know. On March 11th, I'm going to have an official announcement about a 2-book deal that my agent recently got for me. The first book is a, thank you. It's been a long journey. The first book is a novel. It's called The Curse of Hester Gardens, and it is looking at the twin specters of supernatural hauntings and gun violence within a public housing project. And the second book is in the near future and is a takedown of the anti-aging subset of the beauty industry. And looking at how women are, and people in general, are taught that we are not to age gracefully or at all. And the focus on youth culture and how that impacts us. But, you know, I love horror and sci-fi, so the stuff that happens in there has to be a little bit brutal, too.
Okay, and quickly, I have 3 projects I'm working on. One is a poetry chapbook that is all about elder care. My mother is currently, you know, we're preparing for transition, and so poems are coming through me. My poetry friends know all about that. And then the other thing is I have a chapbook of speculative fiction flash that I'm working on. And then lastly, it's a coming of identity memoir about growing up mixed race, being Black American, and my mother is of South Asian descent. And my parents' love story, and my mom, you know, she's 88 next week, and she was born when Burma and India were the same country. They were British India under the British Empire. So I'm writing about what it means for her to be of that last generation that were British Indians. So that's it. Thank you for all your questions.
And thank all of you for sticking it out.
We made it easy. Yes, thank you. There's books for sale. There's cookies and water.
You might know if that pizza place is any good.
Yes.
Is it good? Is it good? Okay, I'm gonna go grab a slice of pizza because wherever I go, if I see pizza, I gotta try it. It's wonderful meeting everyone here.
Yeah, look at you. That was great.
So I'm saying, like, I had a dream like that all the time where I put my key in my house and the key in the house drove away. And I was just like, and I just started, oh my God, I woke up in a puddle.
You're not blocking anybody. No.
All right, let's say New York Yankees.
New York Yankees.
People still watching this.
Easily with my phone.
My man has a real camera. I was like, no, I was impressed. I was like, I was completely impressed.
What's that?
I was like, oh, thanks for having me.